Hi everyone, I'm Mr. Morris. Today we're going to be looking at Unit 1, which is the music industry, and we're going to be going over job roles. So what you need to know for this unit are all the job roles within the music industry and then the responsibilities of all those different job roles. So the first set of job roles we're going to look at are the performance and creative roles, and we're going to begin with the performers. So the first set of performers we're going to look at are the instrumentalists, and these are musicians who only play an instrument. And pictured here is Luke Holland. He's a drummer and he plays gigs as a solo instrumentalist where he is the main focus of the performance. Another example of an instrumentalist here is John Coltrane, and he was a saxophonist that was active from the mid-1940s all the way to the end of the 1960s. The next set of performers we have are the vocalists, and pictured here is Dua Lipa. She is currently a very famous singer in the world of pop music. Sometimes you'll find that there are often vocalists that are also instrumentalists, and pictured here is Ed Sheeran, who is famous for singing and playing the guitar at the same time. Another example of a vocalist who's also an instrumentalist is Lewis Capaldi, and similarly to Ed Sheeran, he also sings and plays guitar at the same time. So the next set of performers we're going to look at are the accompanists. So here is Aidan Halliday, who plays piano alongside Lewis Capaldi. And the role of the accompanist is to just provide accompaniment for a vocalist. So this will often be done by a pianist. So although Lewis Capaldi often has songs which are either just acoustic guitar and vocals or piano and vocals, he also has some full band songs. And for when he's playing live, he has his own band and he uses the same set of musicians each time when they're performing, and these are called session musicians. So they're not actually a part of his band, but for when he plays live, they provide the accompaniment, so he's not just performing by himself or to backing tracks. So the final set of performers we're going to look at are the DJs, and here is Calvin Harris. He's famous for writing the songs How Deep Is Your Love and Feel So Close. And then our final DJ is David Guetta, and he's probably most famous for the song Titanium. So there are quite a few responsibilities for these performers, but the main ones are they have to practice and be prepared. So these musicians need to know their parts really well before they even think about rehearsing with other people. So once they're prepared, they must then attend rehearsals. So they need to be very professional. They need to be on time at all times, and they need to be prepared to give 100% effort. They also need to give performances, so they need to perform live or maybe in the studio. And again, they need to be fully prepared and on time. And finally, for artists that are starting out, they need to be able to do their own marketing. So when you're trying to establish a name for yourself, you need to be able to get out into the industry and show what you can do. But say when you're a bigger artist, then you'll have someone else doing this for you. So next we're going to look at composers and songwriters. So our songwriter here is Bruno Mars. So he writes his own songs, but he also writes songs for other people. One of the songs he's written for someone else was Forget You, which was then recorded by CeeLo Green. Next is the composer, and their job is to compose, so write music. And here is John Williams. He wrote the soundtrack to the Star Wars films. So the responsibilities that the composer and songwriters have are to write music. So in the case of the composers, this can have quite a few steps. So the composer themselves will often have like a rough idea of the tune, and then they'll either write this down or record this. And then they, or maybe someone else, will have to arrange this tune. So that means choose which instruments or voices will play or sing this piece. And then they have to orchestrate it, which means they have to decide which bits of an orchestra will play which part. It's often the case that songwriters and composers will have to write to a brief. So this is mainly the case with composers that are writing for films, such as John Williams. So the people using the music will want it to sound a specific way, so they will send the composer a brief that they have to match their music to. And this can often be really challenging, so it requires quite a lot of skill. And finally, composers and songwriters sometimes have to be involved with the performance itself. So often composers will conduct their own music or give their own concerts of their work, and then songwriters will often play alongside the artists that they've written the song for. The next job role we're going to look at is the musical director, and again we have the example of the composer John Williams. So the responsibilities of this job is to be the conductor, so to stand in front of an orchestra and conduct the music. They will have to organise rehearsals, so they'll organise where everyone meets and when, and then they also have to hire the musicians they want in their performance to play. So next up we have the performance support roles, and the job we're going to be looking at is the live sound technician. So this job role is different to a studio technician, as these technicians operate in a live setting and they'll be found at gigs and concerts and stuff like that. So the main responsibilities for this job role are planning the stage setup. So they will be responsible for rigging and de-rigging, which means setting up and then taking down all the equipment. The technician usually oversees the rest of the tech crew during this process, so they won't be actually doing the work, they'll be watching everyone else, telling them what to do. They are also responsible for sound checking, so this is making sure that the sound is as good as it can be. So this involves checking each microphone and making sure that they're getting a signal off each of the microphones, and then mixing the sound, so the levels of each microphone to sit nicely together so they get a balanced mix of the band playing. So the next couple of job roles we're going to look at are the roadie and instrumental support. So although these are two separate roles, they do overlap quite a bit. So their responsibilities are to assist with rigging and de-rigging, so setting up the stage, bringing all the equipment in. They're responsible for transport, so bringing in all the instruments or transporting the bands from one venue to the next. And then specifically the instrumental support's responsibilities are to make sure that the musicians' instruments are functioning properly, and if anything breaks they'll fix it. They'll tune the guitars and then change the drum heads if they need to every night and stuff like that. So the next set of job roles we're going to look at are the management and promotion roles. First off, we're going to look at artistic management. So here is Elvis Presley and his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, and his job responsibilities would be to give personal and financial management. So he would advise the artist on which opportunities to take, which staff to hire, what to schedule and when, and then what to do with the money that they earn. The managers will also be responsible for working with the record labels, trying to get their artists a deal. They'll be working with venues, trying to get them gigs. They'll help them plan tours, and then they'll help them negotiate contracts and fees and other things like that. So the next job role is venue management, and this is all about looking after the venue. So this venue could be a theatre, a concert hall, or an arena, or any type of venue. When it comes to larger venues, it's quite rare for one person to control everything, so the jobs are often split between roles like stage manager, front of a house manager, and box office manager. So the responsibilities for all these roles are booking the events in, so licensing, management of staff, management of the publicity, and management of security. They'll also be responsible for the health and safety of everyone in the venue, so this will be the artist, the audience and the staff, and this is very important. The next job role we'll look at is studio management, and this job role involves managing the schedule of the studio and avoiding clashes between sessions, and general upkeep of all the equipment in the studio, so just making sure everything's working as it should be. The next job role we'll look at is the role of the promoter. And often people just assume that the role of the promoter is to promote a gig, but there's actually a lot more to it. So their responsibilities are to match bands to venues, so to make sure if it's a pop gig that it would be in a pop venue and not in some metal venue. They need to secure finance for events, so to make sure everything's funded. They need to sort out the insurance and ensure everything is safe for all the people that are going to be working there, so the customers that are coming and the bands that are playing and everyone else around them. And finally, they need to sort out the promotion for the live shows, so making sure that it's marketed correctly to reach the right audience. And then finally for this section we have A&R, which stands for Artist and Repertoire. And basically what their responsibilities are is to scout for new talent and then to sign them to a label. So this used to be done by scouts going to live gigs and things like that, but because everything's online now, it's easy for them to just go on the internet and then find these bands through that. The other responsibility is to be a point of contact between the artists and their management and then the rest of the label's infrastructure, so they are the middleman between the band and the label. So the next set of job roles we're going to look at are the recording roles. And firstly we're going to look at the recording studio personnel. So there's quite a few of these. First off we've got the engineer. So the engineer's job is to record, edit and then mix the sound. This can be for music, film, radio or television and computer games. Then we've got the assistant engineer. They help support the main engineer. We've got maintenance. These people are hired to help maintain the equipment within the recording studio space. So just make sure everything's working correctly. And then finally we've got the electronic engineer. These people have the knowledge about more technical aspects of the musical equipment. So they'll have a good understanding of the internal design and the function of modern music technology systems. So next on the list of the recording studio personnel is the producer. And here I'm going to split the producer into two different parts. So we've got the creative producer. So the creative producer will have responsibility for the musical product. So they could make suggestions for composition, provide vocal coaching, or they could suggest which instruments should be used on the track. They could also provide technical assistance, for example with mixing the tracks. So our example here is Mark Ronson, and he is a very famous producer and he has a lot of creative input on other people's tracks when he's helping produce them. But this is not the case for all producers. Not all producers necessarily have a creative input. So here we have Simon Cowell. He's also a producer, but he doesn't always work in the studio with an artist. So his role as a producer is to have an overall control over the output from his artists. So he's in charge of their image and their sound, but he's not necessarily in the studio with them when they're recording. Crucially, he controls the money behind the artists that he signs, so he funds what they're going to do. So overall, the producer's responsibilities are to manage the whole recording process, to provide technical assistance with mixing, and to make suggestions for the composition. So if they think that it would sound better on a different instrument or a different section would sound better, they can give that call. So next we have the session musicians, and although we talked about them in a live setting before, they also have responsibilities in the studio. So their responsibilities are to record instrumental parts for an artist's song, so not necessarily their own song, for someone else's song. They have to be on time and well rehearsed always. They have to perform perfectly without practice on the day, and they must have their own instrument to hand to perform with. So this is considered a very demanding role, as you have to be on time and perfect at all times. There can't be any mistakes, otherwise they will just get someone else in to do your job. So finally we just have the media roles. So there are four we're going to look at here. We've got the music journalist / blogger. So what they do is write copy for a publication in print or maybe on the web. So they'll be writing about a gig or an artist, maybe an up-and-coming artist or someone that's already famous. So there are often many freelance music journalists and bloggers that just do work off their own back. So they work for themselves, but you can also be employed by a newspaper or a magazine. Next we have a broadcaster, so this is TV and radio. And they select music to be broadcast. They're in charge of editing their footage, doing research on bands and artists, and also demographic targeting, so targeting the right audience to get their work to. Next, we have the software programmer / app developer, and their job is to write or code software products such as apps or programs. They also write music packages for distribution online. Finally, we have the retail and distribution side. So their job is to sell products in shops, stores, and online using retail techniques and skills. They are in charge of moving CDs from warehouses to retail outlets. They're in charge of logistics and selling via mail order and through online stores. So this has not been a full list of all the job roles in the music industry. These are just all the job roles you'll need to know for this unit. So now what we're going to do is look at a few example exam questions that might come up when you do this exam. So there's now going to be 3 questions. I'd like you to look at each question, pause the video, answer the question, then move on to the next. And when you've done all 3 of the questions, you can move on and the answers will be in the following slides. When you've completed this, there is also a Kahoot for you to complete. This will be emailed to you alongside this video. So that is now the end of this part of the lesson. So thank you very much and stay safe.